Hey guys, welcome to another exciting episode at Make Your Mark podcast. I have a really exciting guest for you this week that's going to be talking on networking. His name is Frank Agin. Agin. I got that wrong again, didn't I?
Yeah.
All right. His name is Frank Agin. He is the president of AmSpirit Business Connections, which empowers entrepreneurs, sales representatives, and professionals to become successful through networking. He's also the host of Networking RX podcast, which has insights and interviews related to better business relationships. Finally, Frank is also an author of several books, including Foundational Networking. I am super excited to have Frank on the show. Oh my goodness. I am so glad to have you here, Frank. This is going to be an epic episode.
That's a high bar. You just put a very high bar in front of me here.
But you know what, Frank? The thing is, you say that, but we've had a couple of conversations already, and every time you've spoken to me, you've blown my mind, right? And I knew I
Okay.
had to have you on the show. So
Thank you. Thank you.
now, Frank, before we get into the nitty-gritty of networking and what it all means for business owners, tell us a little bit about, how you got to this point in business, because you didn't just click your fingers one day and you woke up and you had this business, right? Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I had no idea what networking was. I live in Columbus, Ohio, which is in the central part of the United States, for those who are not familiar. I came here to go to law school. I got a law degree. I got an MBA. And I started my career as a tax consultant with a really large accounting firm. And it was a good job. It was good pay, good coworkers, good everything. I just didn't want to do taxes forever. So I left and went into private practice. And a funny thing happened when I went into private practice. And the funny thing was that nothing happened. I had no idea how to get clients.
Oh, wow.
Like so many people in business. This is 1995. There is no LinkedIn. There's no, well, I don't know, there might have been email. Nobody really used it. There weren't cell phones. Things were different.
Right.
So I was struggling, and I asked a friend of mine what I needed to do to become successful. And she said, you need to get into a tips club or a leads group. And I really had no idea what she was talking about. But I got invited to a meeting. And when I showed up, it made total sense, is that I could lift up my whole world just by helping other people. And so for those who don't know, there are organizations out there. BNI is one that people are very familiar with, that meet weekly, periodically, to learn about each other and exchange referrals. And the group I went to wasn't a BNI group, but it just made sense. And I really got involved in that group, and it was really growing my law practice. And I was helping other groups. And at one point I had an opportunity to buy the organization in the early 2000s, and I did. And I stopped practicing law. It changed the trajectory of my life. I decided I was going to become a student of this networking thing. It just made so much sense, building relationships. And so from there, I've really done a lot of reading, a lot of working with people, seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work, and trying to understand, just trying to explain it all.
Oh my goodness. So there's a couple of things there, Frank, that you mentioned, right? First of all, you said, this was in the 90s where we didn't have Facebook, we didn't have LinkedIn, all of that kind of stuff. And so people say that, entrepreneurs, business owners got it easy now, right? Because there's so much access. We've got the internet. It's so much easier. But I was just wondering, do you think if it is, because it could be a lot more distractions, a lot more confusion, because there is so many different pathways you can go down when building a business nowadays that you couldn't do back then. And life just seems a lot more simpler back then than it is now. Is that true? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, people ask me all the time, what does social media do to networking? And my answer is really nothing. I mean, this may sound funny, but babies still come from the same place. We still have relationships the same way we always have relationships. what social media has done for us is it allows us to connect. You know, you're in the UK,
Hmm.
I'm in the United States. You know, this is fascinating. You
Right.
know, and I know people all over the world, you know, India, Estonia, Australia, and we have conversations. I mean, you know, you were like best buds and we've never met.
Right.
You know, and I have neighbors I've never met, right? So
Mhm.
um, is life more difficult? Certainly things are more difficult. Certainly things were more difficult. Um, Certainly there are more distractions now,
Right.
but you know, life's what you make of it. And you know, just there's always going to be good things.
Yeah.
You know, people, someone once said out there, would you rather have $10 million and live in the, the 1900s, 1905, or live today? You know,
Right.
that's a lot of money for 1905, but they didn't have
Absolutely.
penicillin. You know, you've been very
Mm.
wealthy, but if you cut your hand, you might die.
Yeah.
So so you take life as it's here, and I'm happy.
Yeah.
Everybody just be happy.
Also, awesome. So, regards to networking now, like people have been doing this from day dot, right? Networking is is the way people did networking and marketing back then, and it still works. People say that old ways of marketing and getting yourself out there and speaking to people still works today, right? And
Mhm.
so this is a important a kind of aspect of business and getting yourself and your brand and your business out there. But what are some of the common mistakes or even myths that you see people falling into that can be prevented?
Um, you know, as I indicated before, I was joking about it. You know, babies still come from the same place. We networked before we had phones, before we had telegraphs, before
Hmm.
it's all human relationships, and so what has the myths that are out there, the problems that are out there is they'll get on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or whatever,
Right.
and they'll just pitch, thinking, okay, I
Mm.
haven't met you, so I have this right to do this. Years ago, I co-wrote a book with Lewis Howes. I don't people know who Lewis is, but he's a pretty big name out there in the influencer space. And the book was called Linked Working. And really, the message in the book was simply this: is that you operate online the same way you do in the real world. Now, Kay, you would never walk into a networking event, an in-person event, and say, "Hey, look at me, come buy from me." Right? We
No.
would never do that.
Mm-mm.
But people somehow or another feel emboldened that they can do
Mm.
this online because they don't, they're not going to see the person at the grocery store next week, or
Right.
whatever. And so, though I don't know if I would call that a myth, but it's a problem. It's a misconception about really what networking is or what social media is. Um, the other misconception I see about with respect to networking is they think, okay, I'm going to go to an event and it's going to change my world. And I always tell people, well, it will, but it just won't change your world tomorrow. It's going to take time.
Okay.
You're going to have to get to know people. You're again back to building relationships. We're still
Mm.
building relationships, and that's where we kind of a faster paced society. There's less patience, so feel like I need to be online. I need to be pitching and see who's going to buy my stuff. I need to go to an event and I need to hand out as many cards as I can and see how many clients I can get. Whereas in a quieter time of a time where didn't feel like it was moving so fast, you could be a little more patient with it, because you had to send a letter and just wait for somebody to respond.
Right. Yes, that's right. Oh my goodness. So there's a couple of things that you mentioned there already. And so I think the misconception with regards to social media and selling and pitching everybody is because they see everyone else doing it. So they think it's the right way of doing it. And unfortunately, there's coaches out there that say and coach that this is okay, this is what you're meant to be doing, right? And
Yeah,
that's where people are banging their head against a brick wall because it's not actually working. And so
yeah.
When you first started networking and you got yourself out there in the groups, and you said this is a long-term thing, like building relationships is a long term, it's not going to happen for you straight away. How long did you or were you networking before you could see any results coming into your business?
I mean, that's a really good question, because things flow at different paces. I mean, I would get a few referrals early on, and they might be for smaller things.
Mm, right.
But I have gotten introductions to people and that have led to business where it's been 15 years between the interaction and when it ultimately
Ah,
happens.
right.
And I always tell people that things are happening to you today. You're doing things that are today that will manifest themselves down the line. And so it's not a, it's not a pipeline in the sense that, hey, when it's going to move through at this pace, here's my sales cycle. Um, and even with sales cycles, things move at different paces. But with networking, you don't know. I've had people who have shared conversations they've had with other people, and the people don't need them in the moment, but
Mm,
then remember them later. I didn't need you
right.
then, but I need you now.
Right.
So it's just you have to be patient with it. And I am a big fan of saying little things lead to bigger things. Nobody goes
Right.
to the financial advisor and says, hey, here's a mother load of money. They come to the financial advisor and they say, you know what, I've got a little bit of money. I want to get started.
Yes.
And then the financial advisor comes to find out that, oh, they have investment monies from, pension type monies from other employers. We call them 401k monies. Um, or, yeah, I'm just getting started, but my mom needs help. Would you help my mom?
Mm,
Yeah. When the mom's got, $500,000. So, but it all starts from that little thing.
mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I guess when people are really kind of get themselves out there and starting in business, right, and want to develop a network around them, how often should they really be getting out there and talking to people? Now, you are a master at this. You do this constantly now, right? But
yeah.
how often should people, business owners, really be getting out there and networking?
Well, I think that's a great question. Networking is not limited to those moments when somebody has dubbed an event or an activity or whatever as networking. Networking is really kind of a 24/7 thing. It's a lifestyle. And so my advice to business people is that you're really kind of always on, you're always kind of networking. The the vendors dropping off paper to you, right?
Yeah.
For your, for the copy, get to know him, you or her or whatever. You have no idea who that person knows, and you strike up relationships. And that's, I tell people is you always need to be looking for those opportunities to kind of build those relationships. I mean, it's, again, it's like dating, right? I mean, it's not, you're constantly thinking and working, or marriage. You're constantly thinking and working on this relationship. And, you know, you have employees, and making those employees feel good, because those employees are out there talking about the business and helping either bolster or destroy the relationship or your reputation. So it's really 24/7.
Right, and it's so funny because you said, you just talk to everybody. You can talk to the milkman, the postman, whoever
Yeah.
it is, right? And I remember me and my brother are really close, but he's an introvert. My brother's an absolute introvert, right? And so I'll talk to the Uber driver and whoever it is, and he's like, "Oh my goodness, you just speak to everybody. Can you just stop talking to everybody? Like you're not meant to be
Yeah.
speaking with strangers." You know, you're like, well, that's what networking is speaking to strangers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I hear this time and time again, right? When you got business owners that are introverts
Yeah.
and they're afraid to go out there and speak to people, what would you say to that introverted business owner that really wants to get out there and build a network, but are afraid to do so?
Oh, yeah. First of all, I'll say this.
Hmm.
You tell your brother I said this. I think introverts really have an advantage.
Ah,
I think they have an advantage because they're more apt to have a conversation where they're letting the other person talk. If they do it right,
Right. Yes.
because sometimes I see people who are extroverts and they just suck the air out of the room, right? They're just going and going and going, and you're hearing their whole story.
Right.
And if I have a pause in what I have to say, they are jumping in and they got more to say. So I think introverts have an advantage from that standpoint. What I will say for all our introverted friends, and I am somewhat of an introvert. It's
Ah.
Friday. We're recording this on a Friday. I'm gonna go home and sit with my wife. We'll sit and watch sports or whatever. Football, as you call it in the UK.
Yeah.
And I'm okay with that. Whereas I know other people, they've got to have a lot of people around them, and that's fine too. What I will say to introverts is don't feel like you need to go to networking events, but you need to connect with people. So there's nothing wrong with having one-on-one conversations with coworkers or maybe somebody who's down the hall that you really don't know well. Hey, I know their name is Steve. I don't know anything else about them, but we see each other every day, and hey, let's have a cup of coffee and figure out what they're about. And you'll learn a lot and have lots of great opportunities from that. But the question I get a lot of times, Kay, is if there's one thing that I can do to really ramp up my network, and I think this applies to introverts, if there's one thing I can do to ramp up my network, what would it be? And my answer is find something you're passionate about and get involved in the community doing. Volunteer. Find something to volunteer. Maybe it's a pet charity. I love pets. I want to work in pet adoption, because when you go out and you work with that charity I think they're called NGOs, non-governmental organizations in other parts of the world, not-for-profits, however you want to call it, do good type things in the community. You never do it alone. You do it with other people who are very passionate about the same thing. So you have taken yourself out of your little world, as introverted as you might be, to be elbow to elbow with somebody else who's very passionate about what's going on as well.
Right.
And you're going to have a conversation with them, and what you do is going to come out, and you're going to build a network with those people. But the other thing that happens when you do those things is the people who maybe don't care about that pet charity, that adoption charity, or whatever it is, homelessness or whatever it is, they may not care about it, but they see you and that you care. And the fact that you care, even if it's about something that doesn't really resonate with them, they're just going to kind of think you're a better person as a result. So if you tell your brother that.
Okay, interesting. Do you know what the funny thing is, right? Because my brother is an engineer. He does like IT programming, ethical hacking, security codes, and all of this, right? And
Yep.
really is the problem solver. And even though he's not much of a people person, everyone goes to him to go and solve the problem. Everyone wants to go and speak with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he'll come back home and he'll tell me, because he's in a 9 to 5 job, and he'll tell me, I had like 22 people that I had to deal with. They've sent me this many emails. Like there's a whole team of us, but they keep coming to me, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, because even though you don't feel comfortable, you're not a people person, they feel comfortable around you and coming to you because they know you're going to solve the problem, you know?
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
drives him mad, but he's really, really good at really communicating with people,
Yeah.
you know?
That's a blessing.
Yeah, it is, absolutely. And so when you say that if you're an introvert, that is actually an advantage, I can see where you're coming from there,
Yeah.
right? So that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Now, Frank, when you do start networking and you go to networking groups, what is the best way to really connect and communicate with the other person? Because I feel like when people normally go in there, they just talk about themselves, right?
Yeah.
I do this, I do that, I can do this. But what is the best way to really connect with people?
Yeah, I get this question a lot when I get out and talk to groups, and people have this aversion to going into networking groups,
Yeah.
being amongst strangers, and we come by that really very honestly, because as humans we developed way back when in tribes of about 150 people, and you spent your whole life with those 150 people. And if you saw a stranger, it wasn't a good thing. So we have this natural aversion to being amongst people that we don't know. And then we get into these settings, and everybody's like, okay, I need to say something meaningful, impactful. My advice to people is don't focus on what it is that you need to say.
Okay.
Focus on getting the other person talking. Pull them out, learn their story, let them talk. Just let them go. Eventually they will give you an opportunity to talk, and then then you just kind of continue the conversation. I'll give you an example. I'm in the middle part of the United States. We get a lot of snow, and well, not a ton, but we get enough. And I went to an event, and it was snowing on the way there, and I get there and go into the event, and people are just kind of dragging themselves in because it's a little treacherous. And I struck up a conversation with somebody, and it was just as simple as, wow, can you believe all that snow out there? And she said, I love the snow. My husband and I, we love to go skiing. Well, that's all I needed to say, okay, I'm going to let her talk about skiing. Well, where do you go skiing? Because where I live is kind of flat, so I know she has to go somewhere. Right. Well, we go here, we do this, and I know a little about skiing, enough to kind of carry the conversation. Are these weekend trips or day trips, or what do you do? And just let her go and go and go and go. We're not even talking about business, right? We're just talking about.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, you haven't even got to business questions or anything like that.
Yeah, and that's the problem, is people try to, okay, how do I sell what I got? Right. So at one point I just said, okay, skiing's kind of an expensive sport. What do you do to pay for it? That's my way of saying, what do you do? Right. And so she told me what she did, and I asked some questions and so on and so forth. I never have an agenda. I never, ever have an agenda. Right. And she's kind of sharing about whatever. I have some questions, and she might have asked about, what it is I did. And but at one point in the conversation, this is like 20, 25 minutes, maybe less, I don't know, very pleasant. At one point, we exchanged cards. I said, listen, and I knew she was going away that weekend for skiing. In the course of the conversation, I said, listen, if you don't get hurt this weekend, if you're not in the hospital next week, I would love to have a cup of coffee with you. So I'm kind of pulling back to, I was listening to you before. I know skiing matters to you. I was kind of reminding her of that, but I'd love to have a cup of coffee with you. And then when we sit down for coffee, then it tends to get more professional in nature. So you just try to keep it light at those. We're building relationships. We're not trying to find clients. And I think that's, I guess a misnomer with respect to networking.
Yes, because I think the illusion is, we're all networking, we're all business people, we're all there to kind of find clients. So you got to have those business conversations, and that's it. But you're saying, no, that's not the point. You don't you initially have those business conversations. Those conversations will come about later on as you build those relationships.
Yeah, I was at an event last night, talked to a young woman, got her card, and I've already introduced her to two people. You have a conversation with somebody, listen to them, learn about them, what they're passionate about, and just think to yourself, what are a couple ways I can help this person? Because when and now what's going to come from that, I don't know, but I know more is going to come from that than me trying to pitch her on what I've got. Right?
Yeah.
She's, we have this natural tendency as humans to want to reciprocate. Somebody does something nice for us. We want to do something in return. And I'm not being manipulative about it. I'm just doing something genuinely nice that I think will help her. And you know what? She's going to figure out how she can help. Even if she gets on LinkedIn and writes me a recommendation, right? It's something.
Right. And so again, there's a couple of things that you said there. You said about giving out business cards and taking other people's business cards. Now, I've heard a couple of different things here that, oh no, you don't do business cards anymore. You get them to put their contact details in your phone and vice versa. Not many people want to do business cards because they get lost. They don't, no one actually contacts you. They forget who you are and all of that. is that true? Or is business cards still a thing at networking events?
Well, they are for me. It was interesting because I met a couple of young people and they had business cards.
Ah.
And then I met a guy who, was middle-aged and he wanted to do the phone thing, and he was showing me how to exchange profiles. And before we got on, I saw he just messaged me. My problem with doing that is I have to remember to go to my phone then and find his information. Whereas the business card is kind of a tangible little thing where, okay, I got Georgie here, I'm going to enter her stuff in, and then I'll probably get rid of the card. I'll put it in my CRM and then I'll get rid of the card. So I don't know that it'll ever be gone. It's kind of it's.
Okay, because see, I'm one of those people that I get them to put their details on my phone. I take a picture of them so I remember who it is. So we've got a picture together as well, right?
Okay.
And do it that way, because with cards, I do tend to forget. All right, this person, I can't remember the conversation I had with this person now, and who was this, and and things get muddled up, and so I tend to put all their details in the phone with a picture of both of us so I can remember what we actually spoke about and who they are. So I guess it depends on what's easiest for you.
Yeah. Well, here's advice I was given by a good friend of mine she's in Miami, Florida. Her name is Berta Medina, and she actually wrote this in her book. But she said, when you're at a networking event with 5 people, your goal should be to get 5 business cards. When you're at a networking event with 100 people, your goal should be to get 5 business cards.
Ah.
So in her whole point, she goes on to explain is like, if you get so many things and cards that you can't remember people,
Right.
you've probably met too many people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. And, so I like, I've got how many cards from last night? 3. It was an hour event. And that's plenty. And those people will introduce me to others, and I'll go to another networking event and get another 3. And so I don't, I never come away with a stack of, okay, I've got to deal with this.
Right. Okay. Well, that's the difference then, because that's what I see people doing, getting stacks of these cards,
Yeah.
right? And so, so what I'm hearing from you then, Frank, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you want to connect with as many people as you can, but the business cards that are handed to you are with people that you really, really kind of can see yourself doing business with. Is that right?
Well, not necessarily even doing business with, but that I've had enough of a conversation with them that we can follow up and have a relationship. Or, you know what, I'm thinking about, with everybody that I talk to, like, here's somebody I can introduce them to. Here's a way that I can add value to them. I can't control if they're going to add value to me. I can't. So I don't worry about it. I can control what I do for them. And so with each of them, I've followed up, and here's what I'm going to do for you, or here's the introduction I said I was going to make, or here's the information. Many of them may never do anything for me. I can't control that. I can just control what I do.
Yeah. See, I think that's a really good point there. And I know, Frank, that you're a giver, right? Like, you've introduced me to so many people already as well. And so at what point do and you always serve first. You don't wait for the other person to do anything. You serve first. And so at what point do you kind of decide that, okay, maybe you're gonna wait for the other person to do something first, or I can't give any more leads to this person, because I feel like people get stuck, like, oh, if I do something, they're not going to do nothing back, and therefore I'm not going to give a referral or introduce them to anybody. Like, that goes through a lot of people's in their minds, right? So
yeah, sure.
how do you put that into perspective?
Well, I guess, Kay, I don't keep score, first of all. I don't,
Okay.
I don't have a ledger that, okay, I did this for this person. Now I'm going to
Yes.
wait. I made this introduction, and part of the reason for that is things come around, you can't control the pace. So somebody may be able to help you immediately in return. It might be 2 years from now. Who knows? So I don't keep score from that standpoint. But the other thing, well, I'll give you an example. This woman that I said I was going to make 2 introductions to, yeah, I'm helping her, but
Yeah.
I'm also helping the other people that I'm connecting her to.
That's right. Yes.
And so why would I deny these other people just because she won't do something for me, hypothetically, you
Uh,
know?
yeah.
But I have had situations where, well, years ago when I was practicing law, there was a guy that I would send business to.
Okay.
He did a lot of work with, we call it driving under the influence here, driving drunk.
Okay.
So I had clients. I was a business attorney. Clients, Johnny, one of my workers, was drunk over the weekend, got caught driving. He needs an attorney. Well, I don't do that. So I would send it to this other attorney.
Right.
And I was happy to do it because it was helping my client. It
Mm.
was helping this other attorney and certainly helping the person. I didn't really think anything of it. I'm hopeful that this other attorney sends things to me, but I'm not really keeping score. But at one point, this other attorney said to me, he says, I'll never send you anything because I can do all the things you can do. And
Ooh.
I'm like, okay, that's fine. I didn't get mad.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't get mad, but I subconsciously, there were other people who did what he did. I'm not going to stop giving. I'm not going to stop serving my clients or the people who need
Yeah.
help,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't necessarily have to be sending it all that person's way. It just started going another direction.
Mm.
And it wasn't something where, oh, I'm mad, I'm going to make a change here. It was just like, all right, you know what? I'm not going to keep investing in this relationship because the
Right.
person has indicated to me, you know what, I will never reciprocate, and okay. And if that's the way you feel, that's fine. I'll find somebody else who will, but I'm
That,
still going to continue to serve people.
of course, of course. And yeah, I guess at that point you decide whether you want to carry on with that relationship or not. But that sounds crazy to me that somebody would even come up to you and say something like that when you've thrown business their way several times. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know what, it's short-sighted, but there are people out
Yeah.
there who are short-sighted,
Mhm.
and what ends up happening is you start to align yourself with people who see the world the way you see the world,
Right. Okay.
and if you're new out there and networking, these things are happening, you might think, oh, these happen all the time. They really don't. In
Mm.
time, you're going to learn how to recognize people.
Okay.
You're going to learn how to, I mean, I have people out there who are just totally genuine, who get on the phone and, hey, Frank, how can I help you?
Mm.
And they just really want to try and help me. And I've helped them, but they really want to help me. And those are the people that I invest lots of time in.
Yeah.
So, if every year you pick up 1 or 2 people like that, 10 years from now, you got 20 people in your network that are just really dialed into what you're about and sending you stuff, and it's a groundswell of people. But if you're in that year one and you meet, 5 people and 4 of them are crappy and only 1 is good, you're going to think, well, geez, there's just lots of crappy people out there. Well,
Right.
there are, but you will find the good people in time, but you have to be a good person. And
Yeah.
that's the key.
Yes. And the other thing is, when you do come across someone like that, you can't get mad and be
Right.
like, I'm never going to serve anyone again. Because I feel like that's probably why people don't refer or serve first, because they're preventing from going through that emotion in case that person does it to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that's a question there. So how did you, right, emotionally, mentally, right, build up the whole thing of if someone does it to me, just walk away, don't get mad, just find somebody else. How did you build up to that rather than getting mad because you helped them out?
Yeah. I, I'm human, so those things kind of they all sting. I know. I remember when the guy said, "Hey, I'll never send you business." I
Mm.
wasn't mad, but there was a disappointment in me. Um, I think the key is just to get yourself so busy that the little setbacks don't matter. They don't. I can sit and I can commiserate about this person who's never going to see how bad I've sent him so much work. That's
Mm,
not going to change things. You
yeah.
know, I just need to continue on doing what I'm doing and finding somebody else that I can give to, somebody else I can serve. And that person's, they're the ones who've lost in the long run. They're the ones who've lost, because it wouldn't take but a little bit of effort to say, hey, I'm going to try and help you a little bit. Let me figure out how I can help you,
Yeah.
you know? But he had just kind of shut off his mind that he could ever do anything for me. So, and that's fine.
Okay. Wow. I think that takes a lot of courage and a lot of kind of, motivation just to keep going and doing what you're doing because you know it is serving a larger audience, right? And
It
just
does, but it's a better use of energy, because it takes so much energy to hold that grudge and be
it does.
mad.
Yeah,
And, when you help somebody, I tell people, if you're having a bad day, just go help somebody. It doesn't change why you're having a bad day, but at least you feel better about yourself.
yeah.
Right. And then it energizes you. Whereas kind of commiserating or having a grudge, it just sucks energy.
It does, absolutely, absolutely. Now, Frank, I know at this point, listeners are probably thinking, oh my goodness, I need to learn more about networking and doing it the right way. So if they want to connect with you, learn more, where would they go?
They can certainly find me on LinkedIn, Frank Agin, Agin. I think I'm the only one on there with that name, which just shocks me. I run into people from India that have these names that look like, oh my gosh. And I go do a search and there's 25 of them. It's like Dave Smith in India, right? I mean, but I also have a website, frankagin.com, Frank Agin, all one word, which has my Facebook, my LinkedIn, so my email. I'm happy to communicate with people however it best suits them.
Amazing, amazing. Guys, I encourage you to reach out to Frank, right? Find out more about what he's doing, and maybe he'll invite you to his community. You never know. But reach out and figure out how to network the right way, because it will be a positive impact in your business if you learn how to do this the right way and actually serve people. Now, Frank, before we come to the end of this episode, do you have any last words that you would like to share with the audience?
Usually I talk about the volunteering thing, but I will say this. I want people to understand this, that networking works. It may not always work the way you want it to work, meaning you go to a networking event, you're trying to get some business, and you come away with information on that great resort vacation. Networking worked. It didn't work how you wanted it to work. Networking may not work when you want it to work. You go to that event hoping to get something, and nothing happens. And 5 years from now, somebody you met there reaches out to you, hey, I met you at that event and I need you now. So it doesn't always work on your timeline, and it doesn't always work where you want it to work. So you go to an event, nothing happens. You're headed home, you're standing in line at the gas station or the grocery store or wherever, and you strike up a conversation with somebody who could be a great client or a great contact. Didn't work where you wanted it to work, but it worked. So just kind of keep after it.
Yeah. Oh, that is awesome, Frank. Thank you so much for coming to the show. Oh my goodness, so many nuggets in such a small amount of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Make Your Mark podcast at www.makeyourmarkpodcast.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get this and every other episode that comes out. We have lots of great stuff coming, so make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. And thank you in advance for all the reviews and comments. I appreciate it so much, and I look forward to serving you in next week's episode.